Cheers, mate.
This is Why Am I a Mets Fan? A podcast hosted by Samantha Croston and Ashley Wenskoski.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into episode 5, which is hard to believe, of the Why Am I a Mets Fan podcast. Officially 382 subscribers. Ashley is always on it. Thank you so much to all 382 of you. Our most recent episode has over 2,000 views. We really, really appreciate the support, the comments, everything that you guys have been doing to help grow this page in its early stages. This is Why Am I a Mets Fan podcast, a podcast that gives you inside insight into the facts, the farm, and the fascination behind the New York Mets. I'm Samantha Croston. This is Ashley Wenskoski. And this weekend, we went across the pond.
The Mets went abroad to find themselves.
And did they? Maybe.
They didn't lose themselves.
Yeah, that's actually a good point.
They didn't find themselves.
They didn't find themselves, but they didn't lose themselves. They won one. They lost one. Good time to tell you, you can find us anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can listen, you can watch on YouTube. You can find us on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, wherever you want. And the handle is all the same, @WhyMetsPod. So find us wherever you want to find us. The Mets went abroad, and their current record is 28-36. They're 16.5 games back from first place. They're 3.5 games back from the wild card, and they're 6-4 in their last 10, 4-1 since the last pod. That's always a stat I like to keep track of. That's much better than the last pod before this one.
Yeah. First of all, what a weird week, right? They only play 5 games this week, off Thursday, Friday, and then they're off again on this upcoming Monday when this comes out. Got a, kind of a hefty traveling back and forth from London across the ocean. 4 out of their last 5. I'm not encouraged, but I'm a couple steps away from the encouraged, maybe.
I actually would go as far as to say I'm encouraged, and I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Well, let's recap it. I think probably most exciting event of the entire week was this Game 2 win. We always record this on Sunday. We're recording this Sunday evening at around 7 or 8 p.m. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, Ashley and I are sports reporters in Syracuse. So we have other jobs outside of this. We work at the local stations in Syracuse for NBC and CBS. Here's how it happened. The Mets tie it 3-3 in the 6th off a J.D. Martinez 2-run single. And then they have a 3-run rally in the 9th inning, which includes a Mark Vientos game-tying infield single, Pete Alonso go-ahead hit by pitch, and then Jose Iglesias, a.k.a. Candelita, scores on a pass ball. I mean, it was a wild ending. And you have to admit that in those kinds of games, you wouldn't normally think that things would go in the Mets' favor.
Yeah.
But they did.
Well, I would like to say shout out Jose Alvarado of the Phillies. Thank you so much, because were the Mets gonna drive in 2 runners with the bases loaded there? I'm really not sure. All that man had to do was throw strikes, and I'm pretty confident that the Phillies might have won that game. So Jose Alvarado, you're the MVP of this week.
Like, you really... You did a great job, because ultimately the Phillies score 1 on a bases loaded walk, and then Torrens, yeah. MVP, has a game-winning 2-3 double play. Definitely not something you see frequently. Just a really heads-up electric play. Michael K on the call, but they won. Yay.
Yeah, Michael K on the call. We called Jeff McNeil O'Neal at one point. There was a few mishaps. First of all, just whoever made that decision at ESPN, like putting Michael K on the ESPN Mets-Phillies game, questionable. We moved past it. We won the game.
Why didn't they invite them, though? Did you
Gary, Keith, and Ron?
Yeah, why not?
Well, both were national broadcasts. So one was Fox, and then the next day was ESPN. But
so then why is Michael K on the national broadcast?
That's what I mean. There's a lot of good folks over at ESPN that are not named Michael K. So that's all I have to say about that. It was kind of like a felony having to listen to Michael K call that game today.
Although he did have a good game-winning call. I'm going to say it. I said what I said. I liked his call of that Torrens play. Thought he did a good job and genuinely gave it his all, even though we know that he calls the Yankees broadcast.
Yeah, I was more focused on the fact that game-winning double play, by the way, first of all, Reed Garrett comes into the game in the bottom of the 9th, promptly gives up a hit, then walks batter. It's first and second, no outs. I was just sitting there on the couch this morning. They played at 10 in the morning. Very nice, by the way, to wake up with your coffee. I'm kind of into it.
It was so cool.
I'm waking up, I'm sitting there, and Reed Garrett almost blows the game. Then they bring in Drew Smith. Basically, they were about 1 out, 1 hit away from disaster again. Anyways, They came out on top. It had a positive ending. But you're saying the Michael Kay game-winning call. I'm more focused on the freaking guy on the Phillies, which, excuse me, I don't know who it was on third base, taking out Luis Torrens with his slide. I mean, I don't know what it is about the Philadelphia Phillies, but let me just tell you, Chase Utley, all those years ago with Ruben Tejada breaking his leg. Now this guy, you have to go back and watch the video of the slide if you haven't, because it is today with Torrens at the plate so bad. I don't know where they teach that. That is not a legal slide, but all's well that ends well. Everybody's fine. Phillies, stop sliding like that. It's dirty.
It's nasty, and I understand where you're coming from. And the other thing, when you think about Torrens, I will also say this. I think he secured his spot as the backup.
Yeah,
I
I
am
agree.
ready to lock that in right now.
Lock it down. That was kind of violent. Sorry, I'm a little hyped up today.
This is what happens when we record at 8 p.m. Anyway, we have a tweet of the week for you. Actually, 2 tweets of the week. The first one, courtesy of Danny Abriano. Hope we're pronouncing that right. He said, the Mets are theater. There are theatrics every week.
Every week.
This week included. Like, when I think theater, the first thing that comes to mind for me, did you happen to stick around for the post-game interview situation with Pete Alonso?
Oh my God, dude, I was dying. Pete just like clearly didn't know the camera was on him, didn't know that they had cut, couldn't hear.
Nope.
So Michael Kay's just talking to him, trying to do the post-game interview, and Pete is just blank. Nothing behind the eyes. Just so funny for maybe 15, 20 seconds, like way longer than the camera should have been on him.
And that's where, like, as a broadcaster, I do
Yeah.
feel like it's so funny because you know what they're going through. They're like, well, we're going to try and get him. We don't know if we can get him. They go to him. They're like, Pete, how are you feeling? He's like, I'm like, oh, something's going wrong here.
Oh, no.
Here's the other tweet of the week from Sean Carroll News, our boss. But this was a heater. Oh my God, there's only been 5 episodes. We're already like, he said, it's a long way to travel across the pond only to get beaten. Just ask the British. Hashtag 1776. Ashley really liked that one.
I'm not gonna lie. I think that is
You're crying.
so funny. The tears are about to come out. Sean has a lot of jokes. Some of them,
Not all of them are good.
Not all of them are good. Like, Sean, if you're listening to this, but you are funny. That was so funny. I saw that on the Mets account and I was laughing at that for a solid 5 minutes. I was going to retweet it if like one team or the other won both games, but we split the series. I'm happy with splitting the series in London. Obviously, you wish they won both, but just to get out of there with one win and
Against the Phillies. This is a great team in baseball right now, no matter which way you want to slice it.
One of the best.
I mean, that's what you want to see. Also, I have a quick stat of the week for you guys. I'm wondering if the attendance actually surpassed what I have written down today, but I'm still going to tell you this because I think it was interesting. Saturday's announced attendance at 53,882 at London Stadium was the largest crowd the Mets have played in front of since the 2015 NLDS Game 5 at Dodger Stadium, which was a crowd of over 54,000. I don't know if today that was surpassed, but how cool of an experience. I mean, baseball aside, just to be able to be playing there, being able to play in London and grow the game. Like, I like the fact that sports are doing that. You saw it with football, you see it now with baseball too.
Yes, 100%. I mean, I love the London series. There's so many fun elements to it, right? They really, I feel like, on both of the national broadcasts and just the Mets this weekend, their social teams and whatnot, tried to really bring in the international element of it. They showed them doing a lot of like London-esque things.
What was your favorite? Because we've talked about a lot of fun UK elements sort of offline, but I'm curious what stuck out to you.
I mean, a lot of mentions of soccer. I'm not a huge soccer fan myself. I know like the whole entire world is. So I thought that was great, like bringing in that element to something that might be a lot more familiar to fans across the ocean. Even you saw Bryce Harper doing his like soccer celebration when he hit that home run. Like, that's good. Yeah, I just think the Mets really took advantage of it. Like, we have like JD Martinez took the team to see the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. Alonso saying he navigated the streets like a local because JD was actually involved in the London series last year when he was on the Dodgers. So I think it brought so many, opportunities to showcase the more international flair of baseball. I think that's great. I love to see it in London, but I've said this before. I'll say I'd love to see them do more in Mexico City, the Dominican Republic, some of those Central South American countries that baseball is huge. Japan. Like, I think that, of course, I don't know how possible that is during the season to, go fly out to Japan to play a couple games, but I think it's a great idea. Spring training, postseason, whatever it may be, any opportunities to grow the game globally are fantastic. And I was just happy to see the Mets involved in it this week. And I think it was a really good choice picking the Mets and the Phillies. I mean, a rivalry, an in-division rivalry, 2 major market cities with a ton of fans, Philadelphia and New York. So yeah, it was fun.
I mean, especially listen, like this game too, obviously, yes, Mets win, but winning aside, like you just couldn't have asked for more.
Yeah.
It's the exact kind of game that you would want to see, especially if you traveled from London, or from the US to London to get there. But even for the locals, I just think that was an awesome experience. There were also some legends in attendance. Mets, Mike Piazza, David Wright, Mookie Wilson was there. I mean, it really was sort of a spectacle in the best possible way. This was my favorite, sort of UK situation, was the fact that they took the Met social media team, had the picture of Mr. Met and Mrs. Met holding hands with the Eiffel Tower in the background.
Funny. So funny. Like Mr. and Mrs. Met are just on a romantic getaway to London. Is there a baseball game going on? Like no one's sure.
I like the fact that the mascots were there. Whoever decided that needs a raise.
A raise. Also, the Fanatic, sorry, he was outnumbered. Mr. Met, Mrs. Met, Fanatic in the middle. Where's the Fanatic's wife? I don't see the Philly Fanatic having a wife.
Shout out to the Mets because Mrs. Met, ever since her just little re-entry back into this ballpark 10 years ago, which we found out because Ashley guessed it and she was right on the money. I didn't know that. Mrs. Met hanging out for like 10 years now. I didn't know that. I thought she was newer than that.
I mean, I love it.
I love it. I think it was a genuinely just cool experience to watch it. And like we said, the Mets win. So we have a couple things to talk about lineup wise. McNeil was out. He was back in today. What are your where do you stand on that whole situation at this point?
Okay. Well,
Cook
first of all,
me.
McNeil or O'Neal? I'm not sure. I'm gonna cook for a minute.
She's in rare form.
Feeling a little. They shook up the lineup this week. Obviously, Jeff McNeil sat for nearly a week. I believe it was 5 consecutive games, maybe 6. With the call-up of Jose Iglesias from Syracuse. They moved Lindor up to leadoff, so that shook things down a little bit. Nimmo batting leadoff for the majority of the year. Prior to this, got JD in that 4 spot, Alonso a little bit higher up. McNeil sat on Saturday for the 4th consecutive game, 5 out of 7. Listen, Carlos Mendoza keeps denying that it's a platoon situation. He distinctly said, quote, "It is not a platoon. Jeff McNeil is our second baseman." However, Carlos Mendoza, might be time to be truthful with yourself, because then in like the very next breath, he cited lefty pitching as the reason for keeping him out of the lineup. Now, I'm not really sure if I know exactly what the definition of a platoon is, but I do believe that it's lefty pitchers. It's the pitching splits. Jose Iglesias, Candelita, by the way, his music.
New music out soon.
He's been on a tear. It's been hard to keep him out of the lineup. Not only has he been hitting a lot more productively than Jeff McNeil, but he's been doing well defensively as well. So it's one of those situations where when a guy is hot, you just have to get him in there, especially when you're a team like the Mets that is looking to drum up offense in any way they can at all times. Jose Iglesias, obviously he's not the starter, right? I'm not going to say he's the starting second baseman right now, but he has 100% earned that spot to get playing time, get at bats, be in there when a lefty's starting, and the Mets just happen to face a string of lefties this week.
Right, to just compete. And Mark Vientos saying on Iglesias is, of course, someone who has spent a lot of time at Syracuse, saying I got to give him a lot of credit. When I was at Syracuse, he was one of the mentors, the guys in my ear helping me out through the way, telling me how to play the game the right way. Guy's done it at the best for 13 years in the league. Even Mike Vassell, who we had on our podcast episode a couple episodes ago, so go check that out if you haven't already and you want to get to know more about him, said the same kinds of things when he was talking about Candelita. That he really is just a guy that has a great attitude, who has been a mentor to some of the younger players. I don't know that everybody would have as great of an attitude as he had in AAA. I really don't.
Yeah, a veteran, right? Not a star, but a journeyman guy who's been around the league for going on, 13 years, and he's okay with accepting that role, and now he's more than okay with. He was so happy when he got called up. Like, he had that locker room interview in New York with the press, and he was just so grateful to be back up in the big leagues, really embrace his role, regardless of how much McNeil's playing. So I also thought it was interesting, to your point last week, you said this on our very last episode, that you are sick of McNeil's attitude, and I saw some fans echoing that sentiment this week on social media. Like, I saw some distinct videos of him throwing his bat, throwing his helmet when he was striking out, and fans just saying, I really would like to see less of this. Listen, I mean, it's hard when you're just not getting it done. You're not hitting. McNeil, he's 32 now. Everyone's kind of like, has he turned that corner, or is his prime behind him and that batting title year? And are we never going to be the Jeff McNeil of old again? So it's hard on him mentally. I get it. But at the same time, Candelita clearly is bringing bring in something, whether it's on the field, in the batter's box, or just like
on Apple
mentally,
Music.
or on Apple Music.
And mind you, McNeil didn't complain when asked about the situation. He was asked, does he agree with it? He said, I don't have a choice. He makes the lineup, and I respect that. So again, I appreciate his attitude when it came to this. And the other thing is, it's not necessarily, I am a little sick of McNeil's attitude, and I still feel that way, and I felt that way a week ago.
Yeah.
However, this isn't just a McNeil situation. This is the fact that this is a management group that is very quick to make changes and will immediately, and McNeil was just, in my opinion, the most recent example of that. He's not hitting, they call up Iglesias. But we have seen that multiple times throughout this year where they are quick to make a change if something isn't going the way they want it to.
Oh, 3 strikes, you're gone.
It's a tryout. It's a tryout for a lot of people on the team. And I kind of like that.
I do too. I think that's refreshing for a lot of Mets fans in comparison to not only, Steve Cohen versus the Wilpons era, but just GM to GM. Like, I don't even think that was Billy Epler's mantra as much as it is now David Stern's. And I appreciate that. And I think a lot of fans do too. I mean, like you said, not just Iglesias, right? Brett Beatty can't hit. Enjoy AAA. Adrian Hauser, not getting his done as a starter. Have fun in the bullpen, which, by the way, he's doing a lot better in the bullpen. Narvaez sucks. Designate him for assignment. So Steve Gelbs, he said it best this week. There are no free rides on this team, and that's something that we can appreciate.
That is an awesome one-liner. Awesome one-liner. It really is. But to your point, I agree with that. I think it's a good thing that people, I don't know, you could sort of see it one of two ways. I think there is something to be said about feeling confident in your role and not feeling the pressure of feeling like it's a tryout every night. But at the same time, now you have a larger group of guys who are really competitive and really competing for those starting roles or even just a role to be on the team. Outside of that, the Mets sweep the Nationals, which granted a lower level of competition, but they did sweep them. And at this point in time, this is something we're going to talk more about, but it's about wins and how many of them they can get before, let's say, July 4th. I mean, we got to see where we're going to be at,
Yeah. I mean, to your point, is it great to feel like it's a tryout every night? Maybe not, but when you're 8 games under 500, which is the best they were 10 games, 11 games under 500 a little while ago, then it is a tryout every night. Sorry. I mean, if things aren't working, I would like to see that we are seeing that urgency from the ownership and from the front office and the leadership. That's very refreshing to me, and I'm happy that we are seeing that. And I feel like that kind of brings us very naturally to our next point here. Francisco Lindor was on national television. The Mets got a lot of national exposure this week with those 2 games in London, talking about what they went through in May, the culture. We've talked about the culture nearly every single time we've sat down at this table because it's such a big component of this team this year. You're left wondering what is going on in this clubhouse, what is going on with these guys. And Lindor on MLB Network was asked about the Mets' struggles in the month of May. Not a good month, as we know. And he said, yeah, it was tough, but it gave us an opportunity to look each other in the eyes and tell each other, look at yourself in the mirror. Are you cheating yourself out of having a good year? And then he said, if you're not, if you actually believe that you're doing everything to be successful at this level, then continue that. But if you have any doubt, then you need to change something. And that was great to hear from Francisco.
That is amazing. And I see even further down, you're seeing some of these guys who are really trying to change things because you also have the JD hitting suggestion, which was via the New York Post. This was on May 18th, the day the Marlins came back to beat the Mets 10-9 in the 9th after they were up 7-2. JD Martinez suggests that players began taking accountability for their at-bats during the game. So they're going to say in a pregame meeting, this is what I'm trying to do when I go up to the plate today. And if they don't do that, they have to explain why. I think there are certain players in this locker room who are trying to form a level of accountability.
Yes.
That's the word that comes to mind in both of the examples we just gave. Hold yourself accountable. Like, everybody needs to be holding themselves to a high standard and just taking some pride in this season,
Absolutely.
Because I know we say it every week, but every single week I think this is not a talentless roster.
No.
And there are a lot of people, such as a guest who we just had on earlier in the day that we will be hearing from later, but I'm not going to spoil it, who think that there is still hope this season, and they are still hopeful. And that's something I would love to hear about from our viewers. So please let us know in the comments. Do you still feel hopeful? Do you feel like this season is a bust, or does it depend? And that's why I wanted to ask that question on this podcast today. I think July 4th is the perfect time, for example, Memorial Day. Now this is sort of that next checkpoint. For you, where do you think that the Mets need to be for you to feel comfortable?
This is a tough question because I saw your answer on here, and I do actually agree with your answer, which is 500. But 500 doesn't make me feel comfortable. 500 doesn't make me feel good that they should not sell at the deadline. I mean, I don't know what kind of, I guess I agree with it in part, but I also don't, because I would hate to see this be another year for this team that it's like we're 500 or we're 2 games under 500 or we're 1 game over. We're hovering right around that mark, right? And then we buy at the deadline and maybe we make some decisions that are not in the best interest of the long-term future. Now, I understand that it is hard to have it both ways and to make decisions for the future and the present, and that's what every team in Major League Baseball struggles with around the trade deadline, right? Unless you are that top tier, unless you're the Phillies this year, right, and you have World Series aspirations, a lot of the middle of the pack teams struggle with the deadline. Buyers, sellers, what are we going to do? But I don't want the Mets to be buyers unless there's a concrete reason to be buyers. And so July 4th, your benchmark that you just set, we still have a little bit of time until the deadline, a couple more weeks after that. But I don't know. I don't want them to buy unless they really should buy, because there's too many guys going into free agency this upcoming offseason that I think could get them some really valuable pieces. I've named names before. I won't do it right now. So I would just hate to see them waste that opportunity, keep those guys, try to, build, buy a few pieces around them. And then the guys who are going to be free agents in October become free agents anyways. We got nothing for them. Now what do we do?
Right. And to paint a picture of what it is exactly that we're dealing with here, beginning on June 3rd, the Mets have 41 games against teams with, at that point, a combined record of 66 and 136. The competition is getting easier. And here's also the thing about the 500 number. By the way, this is our question of the week. What number would make you feel comfortable by 4th of July? We want to hear from you. We've been seeing this question filtering around. If the number is 500, this is what that means. There's 20 games until July 4th. They would have to go 14-6, and that would make them 42-42 on July 4th. I mean, that is playing wicked good baseball.
Yeah, it's like, how likely is that?
That's the thing. It's not that, I honestly, at that point, if they're playing that great of baseball, yeah, then maybe there is a tough decision that has to be made. But honestly, if I had to guess right now, I would say it's not going to come to that, because I have seen a lot of people on Twitter saying, oh yeah, 500, around 500. That's a long ways away.
I mean, yeah, like you said, 500 on 4th of July would be a major win. So maybe if they are 500 on 4th of July, again, you have a couple weeks until the deadline at that point. Maybe then I feel better about them buying, or at least I feel like we might have an argument to buy. Right now, I don't see it. I hope I'm proven wrong. We'll see. But I did think it was interesting that Steve Cohen made some comments today, Sunday, in London before the game, and he said the fans have been through a lot worse, which I didn't love to hear that, to be honest. I don't know what you think, but to me, that's not...
It's not really encouraging.
I'm not inspired by the fans have been through worse. Like, we know we've been through worse. Maybe could we...
I'm not inspired.
Not inspired. But he did say the decision-making is a lot sharper than it has been in the past, and he was referring to David Stearns. I really do feel like David Stearns is kind of Steve Cohen's guy. Like, he's his ride or die. Like, they're there in London. They're sitting in the stands together, not even a suite or anything. Like, they're just sitting in the normal seats, which I thought was great to see. So he believes in David Stearns, and I think it's a give and take with those two. I mean, I don't claim to know, but I really do feel like David Stearns values Steve Cohen's opinion, and Steve Cohen values David Stearns' opinion.
You do wonder, right? Like, to me, and I don't know Uncle Stevie at all, besides all the things that I see on Twitter.
Wish you did.
But I wish we could have him on this podcast.
Yeah.
I actually have reached out to him before to try and get him to come on this podcast.
Like, you slid into the DMs?
Like, I actually just publicly on Twitter commented on one of his posts and was like, would you want to come on? We haven't heard back yet.
We're hoping to.
We're waiting to hear back from him. I'm sure he has seen it and is just, waiting to reply. But to your point, I do feel like Uncle Stevie's the kind of guy that actually would want feedback. Like, I really think he listens to and is very tuned into the heartbeat and the pulse of the fan base. And I think he wants to do what the fan base wants to see.
Yeah.
Now, of course, not everybody is going to always agree about what that should be.
Right.
And he ultimately and some others are going to have to be the decision makers of that. But I trust him as my captain of this Mets ship.
Yeah.
If Uncle Stevie is driving the ship, then I like where things are headed. And I think a lot of fans, even some older fans, feel the same way. Do you get that impression?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I said, I didn't like that the fans have been through worse comment. That, to me,
fair,
again, is not inspiring. But he also said, what are we, 4 games out of the wild card, which is 3.5 right now. He said we shouldn't be proud of that. We're still 9 games under 500, 8 games now, but it gives you an opportunity to make this season a success. And I do appreciate that last line, an opportunity to make this season a success. I feel as though prior ownership groups and prior front office groups were not always looking for the gleam of light and looking for, like he's saying, the opportunity to make it a success in some way, shape, or form for the organization, even if that success is not the playoffs. Even if it's a success that could mean a lot of things. But I just appreciate that he takes that angle on it, because there were so many years in 2000s, 2010, where it was just like they would have this exact record at this point, and the Wilpons would just be, I mean, that's it. See you next April.
And you know what the unfortunate thing about that is? I appreciate looking ahead to the future. I appreciate wanting to build for better days ahead. But I'm going to say it. With the Mets, there's not always better days ahead.
Yeah.
So I do feel like they should be doing everything they can to, in some way, shape, or form, make this season a success. I'm not saying that means that they shouldn't be sellers, because honestly, in my heart of hearts, that's where I lean towards too. I think right now, we'll see if that changes.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, there's a lot of guys at the end of this, chief among them, Juan Soto, who they need to have their eyes on and at least try for. They got to fish for him.
I mean, they
He's
got
a big fish.
They got to cast the line. I don't know if he'll bite. I don't know if he will.
Will he bite?
I don't know. Ken Rosenthal on Fox Saturday for the Yankees-Dodgers game said on what it will take to sign Juan Soto. He was speculating, right?
Sure.
He said the floor is $500 million, which, by the way, is absurd. Okay, that would be the second.
Wait, the floor.
The floor. That's the floor. What's the ceiling? If the floor is $500 million.
Unreal.
Would be the second largest contract in baseball history, besides Shohei Ohtani's $700 million deal. And then he said, which this sparked the attention of a lot of Mets fans, that the Mets are one of the teams that could sign him. He said the Yankees are certainly one. The Crosstown Mets could be another. The Mets, if Steve Cohen wants to, and he thinks Juan Soto is the guy for the future, can outbid anyone and will.
And will. And I do love that. Like that one-liner goes hard.
Peter.
Because he really will. But that also, like, there then becomes the question of, and I've thought a lot about this, like, for someone who's making that much money, that quantity of dollar bills, $500 million as the floor.
That's a lot of dollars.
At that point, I gotta be honest, I really do feel like there is a big part of you that's also just thinking, like, where am I happy?
Yeah.
Like, what could you not buy with $500 million? Like,
yeah.
I think I think at that point he'll also be thinking, like, what do I really want here for my future? What do I want my legacy to be? Where do I want to be playing for now? And let's face it, right now with the Yankees, he's fitting like a glove.
Yeah, he is.
I really hope that for whatever reason, he's the kind of guy who's like, honestly, I really would appreciate a challenge. It would mean more to be a part of a fan base and a part of a community where instead of being with a team that has seen so much success, I could be with a team where I could really help and be the guy to bring them back to greatness. But that's a tough ask, you know what I mean, for someone who's already playing in New York but is playing with the Yankees.
Yeah, I think Juan Soto likes being a Yankee.
I think so,
to be frank
too.
with you, I feel like he really gets along with Judge and with Stanton and with a bunch of their younger guys. I mean, I feel like the vibes are so high over in the Bronx right now. They're winning. Things are going so great. I think it would take a lot for Soto to want to sign with the Mets. At the same time, if Steve Cohen blows the Yankees offer out of the water, I think it's possible, because it will come down to money like everything does these days. I mean, Hal Steinbrenner said it a couple weeks ago that they're going to cut payroll. So Yankees fans at that point panicked and were like, okay, that means no Soto. I think the Yankees are smarter than that. I think they'll do whatever it takes to keep Soto. I mean, Soto, what's appealing about him is just that he's so young. He's a superstar, and he's 24, 25. He is going to be great for the next 10, 15 years. He is a cornerstone piece that is going to turn some franchise around, or he's just going to be one of the guys like he is over with the Yankees. But yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are. I think if it's close, I think even if the Mets outbid the Yankees by, say, $20 million, I think the Yankees might win.
I mean, because again, what is $20 million in the grand scheme of things?
If you've got 500,
it's probably not enough to convince him. But like I said, we're not in his head. We don't know how he's going to feel at the end of all this. And obviously I'm biased, but I do think that the Mets are a great organization, and I do think that Uncle Stevie will do everything he can to outbid everybody, potentially by a lot, if he really thinks that Juan Soto is the guy. So we will, of course, continue to update you with all of that. We also have a couple of injury updates that we're keeping our eye on this week. Kodai Senga will not return in the first half of this season. Mets manager Carlos Mendoza had indicated that, and it had seemed like, essentially a foregone conclusion for a while, but the Mets are hopeful Senga can return to throwing bullpen sessions next week. Then you have top prospect Jet Williams, who underwent right wrist surgery. He's a shortstop. He's going to be out until August. I mean, that's their number one prospect.
Yeah.
That one is a little bit of a woof.
Yeah, tough. I mean, I know a guy we were hoping to see in Syracuse this season. We've got some, Drew Gilbert is also hurt in Syracuse. So there's been some injuries, bitten by the injury bug a little bit. We can get into the Syracuse Mets in a moment. But just in terms of injuries, we do have some positive news too. Francisco Alvarez and Edwin Diaz, both potentially back this week, both right now in Brooklyn rehabbing. And both, I've heard, possibly could make a Tuesday appearance. So we're putting this out on Monday. Hopefully either one or both of those guys are available again on Tuesday because, listen, Francisco Alvarez, they've really missed him.
They absolutely have, and this is just the cool fact of the week. I'm sure many of you have seen this, but that was awesome that he was catching and he helped to guide a trio of pitchers from the Brooklyn Cyclone for the Brooklyn Cyclones' first no-hitter in nearly 15 years. That's like just a cool thing to be a part of on your way out. That's just some positive news, but I totally agree. I mean, that's one of their. I'm looking at the bobblehead of him that we have right now. I don't know if you can see it in the shot.
Cool.
That was cool. Shout out Syracuse Mets for giving us that. But I feel like he was one of those players who, from an energy standpoint, obviously what he can just do behind the plate as a catcher, I think he's missed. I think his energy is missed. I think the word that comes to mind when I think about a guy like Alvarez is silly. Like, I genuinely think he's just funny and silly, and I think sometimes they need that kind of energy. He's like that younger brother where you feel like you could be more of a kid again because he's around.
Yeah. I like that comparison. I feel like he's great for the atmosphere. I feel like obviously he's their starting catcher. They miss his bat. They put a Band-Aid on it with Luis Torrens. Before that, the cut was kind of bleeding with Omar Narvaez and such. So they put a Band-Aid on it. Torrens, I think, has done a fine job since they've signed him. But yeah, can't wait to see Alvarez back. He actually has been delayed because he had to fly home to Venezuela for like a family matter. So he would have been ready sooner. There was talk that he was going to be in London, but he was not. And Edwin Diaz remains on track to come back. So we'll see. Hopefully we have a new and renewed Edwin Diaz. Maybe Edwin Diaz found himself abroad.
Oh, I hope he found himself. Up next for this team, they kick off a 6-game homestand, 3 against Miami, 3 against San Diego. That's correct, yes? I do believe so. On the road, New York Mets are 15-14. At home, they're 13-22. They really do need, I would say, at least a 4-2 stretch here. It's the perfect time to start getting some of those home wins again because I do not know WTF has been going on at home.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know it's hard to play at Citi Field in the beginning of the year, right? Colder environment compared to some of the other ballparks around Major League Baseball, but now it's June, it's warm in New York, and just the home atmosphere, you would think that would pump them up. I mean, I didn't even realize actually that they were 13-22 at home. That is
crazy.
woof. So yeah, 3 against Miami, 3 against San Diego. Miami, in my opinion, there are not a lot of other teams right now that I'd be happier to see coming up than Miami. Perfect team to just. Right? You sweep the Nationals. You take 1 against the Phillies in London. Best team in baseball. I'm okay with 1. Go into Miami and are they at Miami or are they at home? I'm not sure.
No, they're at home.
Okay. Go back to New York. You got Miami coming in. You got to win 2 out of 3.
Honestly, like let's just sweep.
Or
but let's
sweep.
be realistic. I understand what you're trying to say. Absolutely. Final thoughts on the Mets, then we'll move to Syracuse Mets.
Final thoughts on the Mets. This is a more positive episode than we've had in a couple weeks, so at least there's that. London was great. It was great to break things up and not focus on wins and losses, and I mean, even though they still were, but just focus on the whole growing the game and the global aspect of it. And I'm really happy that they made that trip. And also just a beat on the Juan Soto thing that we were talking about. I know you and I have had these discussions where I don't know if it will happen, but I do know that I'm not sure there's another player in baseball that I would like more, that I desire for the Mets to sign more than Juan Soto. So let us know in the comments. Is there somebody you could name that you want more than Juan Soto?
No, that's actually a great question. Or even if you don't want him as much as Juan Soto, are there any other players that you have your eyes on that you would feel excited about or that you think could help this franchise out? Thanks for letting us know and thanks for watching. Quick update, as per usual, on the Syracuse Mets. They were gone this week. They're coming back home now. We will be continuing to keep our eyes on Edwin Diaz, Alvarez, when they could be coming to Syracuse. We don't know that quite yet, do we?
No, I mean, both are projected to be back with the big club this week, but if they're not, say one of them hits a hitch, hope they don't. But if they do, could see him in Syracuse.
Okay, so it's possible. The other guy is, of course, Acuna. Friday night's game, he had an RBI single off of the Twins' top pitching prospect. He moved up to second on a ground out, stole third after dancing off of second with a big lead, and scored on a ground out. You have a couple things to say about this man.
Yeah, Evan Stockton, one of the broadcasters with the Syracuse Mets, tweeted that, and he said that he's instant offense, and that just got me. That is so true. He is just one of those scrappy, hits an RBI single. He gets himself around the bases.
Right.
He doesn't need anyone else to do it for him.
What even is that?
Instant offense, instant run maker. And yeah, I've said it a bunch of times. I feel confident that if the Mets are not playing for anything come August and September, that we will see Acuna in a Mets uniform this year. I know he hasn't spent a lot of time in AAA. He was in AA as recently as last season. So I don't know. I think it could happen.
They won 4 out of 6 this week. From the St. Paul Saints, which is the Twins AAA team. They're coming home now for 2 weeks. And again, we say this every week, but it's actually true more and more so as the weeks go on. This is legitimately one of the most electric AAA teams that exist in the field right now.
Yeah, they are in first place in the International League East as of Sunday still. And I'm excited to see them home for 2 weeks. I know people in Syracuse, not sure how much our audience has a beat on upstate New York, but it's such a fun thing to do in the summertime. Go out to NBT Bank Stadium. They have so many great promotions like Bark in the Park and things like that.
And Taco Tuesday.
It's also rare for a team to be home for 2 weeks with how the minor league schedules are set up now, because they play 6-game series. They play the whole team for an entire week. So for them to be home 2 weeks in a row, they're playing the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs and then Rochester, I think is exciting. I think they're just continuing to stack those wins, and they're going to give us something exciting to talk about, not only in Mets land, but in Syracuse, Central New York land this summer.
As per usual, keep your eye out on guests. We just had a guest who you might not think. It was an unlikely guest who we will be dropping sometime soon, but continue to check back, because sometimes we're dropping some midweek episodes. We call them extra innings, where we have certain guests on and we talk about Mets related things. That's Ashley Wenskoski. I'm Samantha Croston. This was episode 5. Thanks so much for being with us. We will see you again next week or sooner.